Today's date is Sunday, September 15th, 2024. The current local time is 12:36 p.m. EDT, and that is Boston time. Okay, so yesterday we laid out a pretty robust foundation in terms of just what the scaffolding of traditional astrology really is. And for some of you, that was different, differently different. And for others of you, you've taken this course before, it was a good refresher. And I think that for me is something I really enjoy hearing, that people have taken this course before. They're like, it's really good to be back because it was a great refresher. And truthfully, between me, you, and the gods, no one has ever said to me as frequently in upper level Oraculos classes, oh, wow, it's good to be back in PCA 1. Or, oh, wow, it's good to be back in PCA 2. Or, oh, wow, it's great to be back in PCA 3. I never hear that. The only class I hear that in is FOCA. People say, oh, wow, it's good to be back in FOCA. Because the things that people forget at higher level Oraculos classes are always things that are FOCA based. And whenever I have to do an exam or an assessment for an Oraculos trained astrologer, and there's something within the exam that they haven't remembered, or something that is just wrong, it's a FOCA thing. It's something we learned in FOCA. So FOCA, to a very large degree, this course it's the course, truthfully. If I died tomorrow and I only gave the world one thing, I would be very grateful if this were the class I were remembered for. Okay, so we're going to start today by reading a section from Bonacci on basic astrology. So this is the book. This used to be one of the textbooks for this course. This is Bonacci on basic astrology. It's by Guido Bonatti, and it was translated by Dr. Benjamin Dykes. The first one is very, very nice. They're all nice, but this book it's very used, and I'll show you on the inside. It's very, very much tattered and torn and used, and you see all the highlights. It's a very good book. It's a very wonderful book. So I highly look the whole page, basically. So if you had to get a supplementary book, Erica does that. Very good, Erica. Very, very good. That's the way to read and learn. So this book is a wonderful complementary text to have at your side, Bonacci on basic astrology. And on the first page of this, it's really, really, look at that. It's really, really, really bad. Do you see that? And then there are whole chapters that I just wasn't feeling. So there's no annotations. Okay. The very first page of this book is fascinating because, so I'm going to read basically from here to here. So if you want to go to sleep, now's the time. So he says, oh man, I guess I'm going to read the whole page. All right. So he says, on the usefulness of astronomy in general. The soul is the most noble thing which is found in man, for it gives being and perfection to the body, and its foods are most noble with respect to the body's foods, since the soul is most noble with respect to the body. And the soul rejoices in intellectual wealth, and this wealth depends on knowledge, that is to say, philosophy. And the soul rejoices in this and delights in it. And that in which it rejoices is its food. Wherefore, since it is on the side of truth, it loves truth, nor can it apprehend so truly and so fully through any science as it does through astronomy. And there is nothing beside, first, philosophy, in which the soul gains so much wealth as in astronomy or astrology. For through it, we know and understand impassible and unalterable creatures, and those not changing into another essence, as are the supercelestial bodies. Supercelestial bodies mean the planets. And through those supercelestial creatures, we can reach an understanding of the Creator, God, and know about Him however much more the human mind can attain to, and we can perceive Him to be impassible and unalterable. And because the supercelestial bodies are from what is perfect and most noble, which no one denies, their shapes are most noble and perfect, namely spherical, to which there is found neither beginning nor middle nor end, and thus their operations are most noble and most perfect, compared with the rest of the operations of all professions which there are in this world, even if it is the profession of the medical doctor, which is also noble, or rather, that medicine is more noble of the professions within this terrestrial world. But the profession of the stars and their works is most noble, and exceeds all other professions and all other workings. For a cause is complete, and what is complete induces an effect. For the medical doctor gets involved with inferior and corruptible bodies, and those susceptible to alterations and the like. But the astrologer gets involved with the operations of the supercelestial bodies, which are neither corrupted nor altered, for they act in the inferior corruptible bodies, concerning which the medical doctor busies themselves. Wow. Fascinating. Isn't that amazing? If it's not amazing, then you just have to listen to the recording 5 times this week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then the amazement will settle in at some point between Monday through Friday. But it's amazing because what he's essentially saying is that as astrologers, we study the closest thing to God or the closest thing to the divine that there possibly can be, because we study the supercelestial bodies, and the supercelestial bodies are leaving their imprint on everything within the material world. And then Claudius Ptolemy, in the Tetramorph, he says how that imprinting happens. He says that the cosmos and the gods of the cosmos, the Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Sun, Venus, Mercury, Moon, Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Sun, Venus, Mercury, Moon, Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Sun, Venus, Mercury, Moon. Now you say it. Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Sun, Venus, Mercury, Moon. Every astrologer worth their name should know the Chaldean order of Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Sun, Venus, Mercury, and the Moon. And if an astrologer doesn't know the Chaldean order, I want my money back. Anyway, so Claudius Ptolemy tells us, he tells us how that operation works, how that imprinting works. He says that because of the whirling motions of the planets, that whirling causes a natural alteration within our elemental bodies. And as a result of that, we go through the 4 phases of life. The 4 phases of life is where we're going to start our conversation today, because the 4 phases of life are generation, preservation, corruption, and destruction. Generation, preservation, corruption, and destruction. These things happen to everything within our material plane, and they do not happen to the planets. Because the planets are super celestial. Super in this context, meaning above. So the planets are above the cosmos, and therefore they're not altered by changes and perturbations which occur within the cosmos. This is really, really, really exciting stuff. You know, this is, of all the classes I teach at Oraculos that I'm really stoked and fired to teach, FOCA is always that. Because FOCA is the groundwork of laying the foundations of the magic that we're going to build as we continue to go on. Because astrology is a magical practice. It's a very technical practice. It's a very boring practice. It's a very painstaking practice. It is painfully, technically boring, period. However, all of those things that we learn as astrologers, they set us up to do something that people don't even realize is possible. When you can pick up a birth chart and read from that birth chart all of the foundational concrete details that have occurred within a person's life that have allowed that person to be exactly who they are and as they are within this lifetime, there's nothing quite like it. And as I think about this, I'm reminded of being in dance school in Cuba and also in Jamaica. I dance in Jamaica, I dance in Cuba. But you spend months and months and months and months training to be on stage for 3 minutes. And then after that, it's done. And it's like, whoa. And I recently heard one of the gold medalists from America say this. I think it was Simone Biles. I heard her say this in an interview, that you train for months and months and months to do a routine that lasts for 30 seconds. And the reality is that the amount of work that you're going to put into your life becoming a proficient astrologer is a lot of work, given the fact that you're going to give an hour-long reading. So it's as if the length of the reading doesn't actually match the work involved, but an hour is a long time. I'll tell you one more thing. As you can tell, I talk a lot, but I'll tell you one more thing. When I was back in school in the Bahamas, I think I was in the ninth grade, there was something called Junior Achievement, JA, and everybody wanted to be in JA because that's where all the cool kids were. And conversely, that's where all the gay kids were. So I was in JA, of course. And in Junior Achievement, we had a speech competition, and it was a 5-minute long speech competition. And if you don't know what to say in a 5-minute long speech competition, that speech competition will feel like 2 hours. If you don't know how to fill those 5 minutes, that will feel like 2 hours long. And if you go into so that's 5 minutes. If you go into a hour-long reading and you don't know what to say, it'll feel like you got lost in Neverland. You'll feel like Dorothy and the house dropped on you. No, the house didn't drop on her. The house dropped on the witch. You'll feel like, is it Dorothy and the path and the wizard and the thing? And you will feel like you're Dorothy lost in Neverland. I feel like I'm mixing the things up. That's Peter Pan, whatever. And the point is, in an hour, if you don't know what to say for a whole hour, there's nothing more painful than that. So at Oraculos, I overteach. I teach you far more than you'll ever need to know in that hour-long session, so that as you continue to give the reading, you have more and more and more and more and more momentum. Because the problem with astrology isn't that there's too little information, it's that there's too much information. But if you don't know how to tap into the more, you'll feel as if you're out in the cold with no sense of direction. And there's nothing worse than everything that we do in life has to have a sense of direction and a center of gravity. The center of gravity within an astrologer's practice is the chart. You don't start talking about your ancestors, you don't start talking about your gods, you don't start talking about your spirit guides, because all of those things are superfluous. All of those things are superficial to an actual astrological practice. The center of gravity, the source from which you derive your knowledge as an astrologer, is the birth chart. Nothing that you know about no gem or no crystal or no angel or no Enochian magic or no nothing is going to help you overcome the hurdle of not knowing how to read a chart. As an astrologer, the birth chart is your center of gravity. Your sense of direction is also based on the birth chart, but that's something different. We'll talk about that later. So now, let's go into the things for today. And if at some point in time my voice disappears entirely, then I'll turn it over to Karen and Marlena to teach the class. Okay, so the 4 phases of life: generation, preservation, corruption, and destruction. Wonderful. That is for today. I'm going to go back up here though, and I'm going to keep building in here because because you'll see why. So yesterday we spoke about the triplicity being connected to the word element. Triplicity means element. People, my loves, please don't ever forget that triplicity means element. It's basic schmasic. Triplicity means element. And then we spoke about the 4 elements. Now, this quadripartite, where's our Otsar Hamilim? Quadripartite means 4 parts. Quadripartite. Hope I spelled that correctly. Yes, quadripartite means 4 parts. Kind of like how, and so that's Latin. The quadra is meaning 4 parts. Then we have tetra meaning 4 as well, but that's 4 in Greek. And from that we get the tetra biblos, which means 4 books. That's what tetrabiblos means. 4 books of astronomy is the tetrabiblos. We also get the tetragrammaton. Tetragrammaton, which means 4 letters or 4-lettered. Let me see, is there somebody trying to, ay Dios mío. Anyway, so tetragrammaton meaning 4-lettered, as in the 4-lettered name of God. Yeah. The 4-lettered name of God is called the tetragrammaton. There's also another something. Tetramorph. Tetramorph. We know the tetramorph, the 4 creatures. Where do we see these 4 creatures? Aha, glad you asked. Tetramorph. The tetramorph are the 4 creatures that we see representing Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John in the Bible. And here we have the bull, which is representing the bull, the Taurus. And then we have the lion, which is representing Leo. And then we have the eagle, which is representing the scorpion. And then we have the man in the middle representing Aquarius, the 4 fixed signs. We see that there. We see that here as well. We see the bull. Well, that looks like 2 eagles. I want my money back. That's not the Tetramorph. Anyway, so let me see where else we see this. Come back over here to Copilot. Search. Wikipedia. Tetramorph. A tetramorph is a symbolic arrangement of 4 different elements or the combination of 4 disparate elements into one unit. The term is derived from Greek tetramorph, shape. So, the elements of the Christian... here we are. The animals associated with the Christian tetramorph originate in the Babylonian symbols of the 4 fixed signs of the zodiac. The ox representing Taurus, the lion representing Leo, the eagle representing Scorpio, and the man or angel representing Aquarius. And in Western astrology, the 4 symbols are associated with the elements of earth, fire, water, and air. And then we also have the 4 books of the Bible, or the 4, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, where Matthew is supposed to be associated with the man, and John is associated with the lion, and then Luke is associated with the bull, and then Mark is associated with Scorpio. So anyway, it's quite fascinating. I learned that in school, because there's a lot of stuff we learn in school that actually has a very deep, a very deep esoteric nature. Finally, if we go to the Wheel of Fortune card in the Bota, I like the Bota deck personally, but I don't like all of it. So I like the Bota deck up until a point. This is the Wheel of Ideas. Why is that so tiny? Here. Let me make that bigger. Okay. So anyway, save image. The tarot is one big book of the apocalypse. Because this tetramorph this is the first place in the tarot where we're seeing these 4 fixed creatures. And here we see the bull, which is representing Taurus. These are the fixed signs. Taurus is a fixed earth sign. This is the glyph of earth again, so that you can know. We have Leo, which is a fixed fire sign. That's a glyph of fire. We have Scorpio, which is a fixed water sign. That's the glyph of water. And then finally, we have Aquarius, the man, which is the glyph of, the glyph of air sign, which is an air, like that. You see? And these are the 4 fixed signs. And these 4 fixed signs, they are in the 4 angles of this swirling wheel of fortune. And the reason why we have the 4 fixed signs around the wheel of fortune is because this Wheel of Fortune card in the tarot, the esoteric name for it is the Lord of Fate, the forces of life. The Lord of Fate, the forces of life. So what that means is that this swirling Wheel of Fortune in the middle, that sometimes works in our favor and sometimes doesn't work in our favor, and sometimes we say, oh my God, my luck sucks. Your luck doesn't suck. Your luck is simply the manifestation of the turning of the wheel of life. And the reason why we have the 4 fixed signs around the perimeter of this is to say that everything that occurs within your life is a manifestation of unalterable cosmic law. So we have the 4 fixed signs to say that even what seems random, even what seems chaotic within your life, even what seems like something that is completely just happened to you, everything that occurs within the unfolding of our lives is the manifestation of fixed cosmic law. Fixed because that's the 4 fixed signs, you see? Tarot is, it's an indispensable tool as far as I'm concerned, as far as an astrological practice is concerned, because tarot brings to life in pictorial forms the things that this chart that you see on the screen, this chart could never do. I'm bringing up a chart. This chart on the screen, you see this, and it's a foreign language. And no matter how good at astrology you get, this chart will always be a foreign language for you. What isn't a foreign language for us is the language of pictures. We think in pictures, we dream in pictures, we visualize in pictures. Pictures represents a fundamental way in which we form memories as children. So I could be very good as an astrologer. I could be as good as I'll ever be in this lifetime. And this chart will still be a foreign entity because all of these scribbles and numbers on the screen, what do these things mean? They don't really mean anything, But if you see a picture and you say, oh, wow, this picture means something to me. You see a picture over here, you can more easily sink your teeth into the interpretation of this picture than you will ever be able to sink your teeth into the interpretation of this chart. Which is why astrology has for a very long time been something for the elites. Astrology is an elite sort of situation, and it's also a very, astrology does nothing to invite people into it. I'm not talking about the astrology that, people do in the grocery store and that you see in the newspaper, because that type of astrology invites everybody in. But astrology at the highest form of its expression, it's a very snobby subject. It doesn't do much to invite people in because it assumes that you know so much in order to even begin having an astrological conversation. And that is why more tarot books sell every year than astrology books sell. If you go online and you search, top selling metaphysical books, the tarot books are going to sell faster because the tarot has never pushed anyone away. Tarot has always felt like something that we can do because you look at the card, you see a picture, your brain automatically knows what to do with that picture. Whereas when you look at a chart, it's unless you know how to interpret that, it's kind of like a dead end. So tarot, truthfully, is a wonderful aid as far as an astrological practice is concerned. Let's come back over here to what we're doing today. So tetra, quadripartite, 4 parts. Tetra is also meaning 4, but that's in Greek. Tetrabiblos, 4 books. Tetragrammaton, the 4-letter name of God. Tetramorph, 4 creatures. So this idea of dividing things into 4 is very foundational to our astrological practice. 4 has always seemed like the number of the concrete world. And the reason for that is because the glyph of the concrete world is the glyph of the cross. I really like green. Sorry. Let's change that. So the glyph of the concrete world has always been the glyph of the cross. And this cross glyph becomes even more, psychedelic when you think about how the cross glyph originates. Let's scroll down and go to a clean page so that we could talk about how the cross glyph originates, astrologically speaking. So in my book, in that chapter, Hermetic something of the something, I can't remember what I named it, but the Hermetic situation, maybe it's chapter 3. In that chapter, I speak about how for the ancients, everything originated as this universal concept. And I also spoke about this in the planets video. I'm not going to overly repeat it, but this universal concept was called one, the all. One, the all. And the ancients tell us, the ancient alchemists of the West tell us that one, the all represented the birth of itself and the destruction of itself. It represented the domination of itself, or that which dominates, as well as that which is dominated. And so the ancients say that out of necessity, these two poles that exist within one, the all, separated into not just the dominated is also the dominator, but that which is dominated, circle on the outside, is dominated by this point in the center, the dot on the inside. So now, when we move away from the pure symbol of the circle glyph by itself, we find this statement being made that something crystallized within the heart of chaos, because this circle on the outside is representing chaos. And so here we see something crystallizes within the heart of chaos. And what is that thing that crystallizes within the heart of chaos? It is the idea or the principle of individuation, the idea or the principle that some individual version of a thing can exist in what was once a chaotic ocean of all possibilities. And this crystallization is the I principle in nature. It is that part of all of us that specifically has the ability to call myself I, as a separate entity, individualized and in radiant expression. And so that is what the sun glyph is representing to a very large degree. And everything that was original chaos that the circle glyph represented now became equated to the moon. So within traditional astrology, we have this idea of the circle glyph representing original chaos is associated with the moon, and therefore the moon is associated with original chaos or the matrix. We know that the word matrix means that from which everything else arises, which is why matrix is also the Latin word for the womb, which is very lovely. I wish we would go back to calling wombs matrices, because matrix means that from which everything arises. It's very, very, very nice. And it gives you a whole new thought to that movie, The Matrix. As a matter of fact, the more spiritual Kool-Aid I drink, the more I want to go back and watch the movie, The Matrix. Because you realize that the movie, The Matrix, actually was touching on some psychedelic themes. So the moon is representing the matrix because this circle is representing the morphic field or the matrix out of which everything arose. Now, if we stay in the state of the morphic field where there's more chaos than cosmos, then everything gets annihilated, which brings me to an image that I love to show people, because if you can handle this next image, then you could sit with me at the table. So the image is the image of Sheila the Gig. Do we all know Sheila the Gig? I'll show you Sheila the Gig. This is Sheila the Gig. Let's make this big. This isn't the exact image of Sheila the Gig I wanted to show you. I think I have it somewhere else, but this is Sheila the Gig. Sheila the Gig is an old haggard woman who has her hands in her humongous vulva, and she pulls back her vulva and out of it grows tentacles. Let me see if I could find the picture with Sheila the Gig with the tentacles coming out of her vagina. Where is it? No. Well, maybe this one. No. Anyway, the point of the matter is, you just have to take my word for it, that Sheila the Gig pulls back her situation. Here she is. Oh, someone needs to feed Sheila the Gig. Let's do this one. Sheila the Gig pulls back her situation. Oh, what is? Oh, no, that's too much. Okay, let's come back to let's stay focused. She pulls back her situation, and tentacles flow out of her vagina, and those tentacles pull in the souls of the dead back into her body. Now, metaphysically speaking, this is meant to represent the way in which, when we die, and that glue between our soul and our body is loosened, that which is spiritual, that which is wraith, W-R-A-I-T-H, that which is wraith about us, that which is spiritual, that which is pure spiritual substance, we fly back headfirst into the uterus of Sheila Nagig, where we melt once more into the morphic field out of which all possibility arises. So Sheila Nagig's womb is representing our entry point into the world, but it's also representing annihilation and us being drawn back into a non-existent state. Sheila Nagig. We see Sheila Nagig manifested within Indian art through Kali. And here we have Kali. Let's do another situation. Let's bring this up. So here we have Kali. Here, this is a nicer version of Kali because there are some versions of Kali where this isn't a thing of skulls around her neck, but it's a chain of testicles hanging from the neck of Kali. So we thank Kali for wearing skulls today. But within this Kali, we see the same sorts of situation of Kali being a goddess of destruction or Kali being a goddess of annihilation, where even the greatest of the gods, Lord Shiva, has to die or perishes under the weight and under the destructive force of Kali, because Kali is representing original chaos to a very large degree. And when we think about chaos in the West, we tend to think of something evil, but chaos is simply representing this cutting down of everything and turning it back into fertilizer. So chaos is actually this very fertile womb out of which everything arises, but it's also a womb where, if we allow for there to be too much chaos, everything contracts back into the womb of chaos and turns into a non-existent state anymore. So the ancients tell us that in order for us to have a life or a universe within which to live, we have to defeat chaos. We have to create a world in which there is more cosmos than there is chaos. And this is what we see when we see hero and dragon. This is what we see when we see things like this, where the hero is slaying the dragon. So here we see Hercules slaying the dragon. And this is a scene in which the solar hero defeats the lunar dragon, which represents nature. And the reality is there will always be much more nature than there is solar hero, and therefore Hercules' victory is just one tiny victory, because the victory of Hercules isn't actually the truth. So all of these images where we see the hero destroying the dragon, even this image where we have the archangel Mychal. So we say Mychal and Lucifer. We have the archangel Mychal essentially standing on the dragon, Iblis, Lucifer. Which one is it? Let's do this one. This is the same sort of thing, that in order for us to have a world in which there is actually world, the solar hero has to defeat the lunar dragon or the lunar demon, which is representing a complete flattening of our entire existence into non-existence once more. I'll show you one more image of Hercules and the Hydra. Hercules and the Hydra. Same thing. The story of Hercules and the Hydra, where he chops off one head and 3 other heads grow. All of these images and all of these stories are stories to show how, truthfully, there will always be more nature than there is our ability to fight nature and hold back the hands of nature. But ultimately, that is what our material universe represents. Our material universe is representing this illusion that there is actually more cosmos than chaos. That's the cosmos in the middle. But this entire chaos on the outside represents the actual reality of where we exist. If this were one of those maps in the mall, this X would represent, this is us. You are here. We are here in the center of this. But what is in the center of that? In this dot in the center is every sun, every moon, every planet, and every galaxy, every star, every cluster, every nebula, everything that we have defined within our material universe is represented within this dot. The entirety of our material universe, with its hundreds of thousands of planets which are potentially habitable, are existing within this dot. All of the hundreds of thousands of light years it would take for us to get from one point of the universe to the next point, the entire place in which we're sojourning is in this dot. The whole thing, the whole shebang, the whole Big Bang occurred in this dot. The expansion of our universe is still occurring within this dot. What is beyond this dot of our universe? Original chaos. So that's what the sun glyph is meant to represent to a very large degree. That some tiny part of us has screamed, standing on our soapbox, "This is me!" And it's cute. It's a cute idea that, oh my God, that this is me! And all of our kings and all of our queens and every presidential election occurs within this dot. And all of the wars occur within this dot. And every joy and every sorrow and every love and every divorce and everything is occurring within this dot. And all of the things that we take personally occurs within this tiny dot. But this tiny dot isn't even the beginning of the tip of the iceberg of what really exists. This is the tip. This is the entirety of what really exists. And if this were to one day, today or tomorrow, remind itself that it has this crystallized zit somewhere on its body, and it chose to burst that zit, then our entire universe will be flattened once more into the primordial chaos out of which we arose. Fascinating, fascinating, fascinating. Okay. Saying all of that, to come back now and talk about these ideas, this no, where were we? Sorry. So, original chaos becomes ascribed to the moon, and matter or material plane, our material plane becomes ascribed to the sun glyph. And we see within this how the sun representing fire and the moon representing water represents the first real duality that exists within our universe, the duality of fire and water. And out of fire and water, the other two elements arise. So as far as traditional astrology is concerned, fire and water are the primary elements that exist, because fire and water exist on two ends of the spectrum. Fire is representing generation, water is representing destruction. Fire is representing generation, and water is representing destruction, which now that I've gone through my whole Hercules story, you can see. Wonderful. And we have Marlena typing at the same time. Fire is representing generation and water is representing destruction. Now, let's just stick with that. Well, actually, let me put in these other two. Preservation is the earth and corruption is the air. Just so that we complete this model of the four phases of life or the four life processes: generation, preservation, corruption, and destruction. Now, we are told that the solar warrior essentially defeats the lunar dragon. This is a theme that comes up again and again within Western mysticism. It's also a theme that comes up again and again within Western alchemy, that the red warrior is defeating the green dragon, basically. And why is this important? This is important because while we can see this as the sun and the moon glyph standing side by side, we can also ascribe this idea of the sun to the vertical line and the moon to the horizontal line. The vertical line, as we know, is associated with the phallus, the upward pointing triangle, the fire element. The vertical line is associated with the phallus or the penis, the male reproductive organ, and the horizontal line is associated with the female reproductive organ. The horizontal line is associated with the uterus, the womb, the vagina, the matrix. And so this idea of the masculine solar hero conquering the lunar dragon is also one that we see in the crossing of the two lines, the vertical line and the horizontal line. So there's the horizontal line living her best life. Well, let's change this. There's the horizontal line living her best life. And then out of nowhere, some part of her that wants to say, hey, you thing that is dominator and dominated, I want to call myself the dominator within the situation. So some part of herself arises and extends itself upward and through her. And this is representing the crossing of the masculine principle, which is the sun, and the lunar principle, which is the moon. And in that crossing, or in this dominating of nature that is done by the sun, a third thing is born. Because before we had horizontal line representing the moon, vertical line representing the sun. What happens when I bring the two of them together and I have them crossing each other? A third thing is born. Because we're told within Western alchemy as well that, let me bring myself on the screen so that you could see. We're told within Western alchemy as well that as these two principles cross each other, this masculine principle is saying, yes, I'm winning. Look at me defeating nature. And the more he crosses nature, the more he gets stuck. Now, it's like they cannot separate anymore because they're stuck. They're completely stuck. So in that process of the masculine principle conquering the feminine principle, they get stuck. There's a fixity that occurs. And now the two of them are stuck together and locked, and they create this new shape, which is the shape of the cross. So now out of the one comes the two, out of the two comes the three, and out of the three comes the all. This is something that we hear, this is an axiom within traditional Western alchemy, that the monad gives birth to the duad gives birth to the triad, and the triad gives birth to the all. Okay, so let's do this now. So here we have, once again, we have the moon. The moon gets conquered by the sun. And in the process of that conquering, they create a new thing, which is now the cross. The vertical line and the horizontal line in their crossing creates the cross. And now we get a third concept. And that third concept becomes the cross of matter. And this cross of matter has 4 angles. And within those 4 angles, we have our 4 elements. The element of fire, which is representing generation. The element of, let's do this in a somewhat type of order. The element of air, which is representing corruption. Note the color change as well, please. And please also let your mind associate these colors with the elements, because that also becomes important within traditional Western mysticism. We have the element of water, which is representing destruction. And we have the element of earth, which is representing preservation. So these are the 4 elements: the fire, the air, the water, and the earth. And these are their glyphs. Traditionally speaking, red is corresponding with fire, yellow is corresponding with air, blue is corresponding with the next thing, with water, and green is corresponding with the earth. These are the traditional colors for the 4 elements, okay? So make sure that you know this, because that's what these 4 elements represent. And this brings us to another very important point, which is the fact that the earth glyph within traditional astrology is the glyph of the cross within the circle. The earth glyph in traditional astrology is not the glyph of the X in the circle. That's something completely different. Let's go to the book. So on page 73 of the book, you will see the 4 elements. Oh, okay. Let me just put this here 1 second. I'm going to just open up the book on the screen for those of you who don't have the book present. And I'm doing this open the book on the screen as a bit of a courtesy because truthfully, you should have the book. But page 73, which in the PDF is going to be page 103, we see the 4 elements. And I think I did this in a way, well, this also makes sense. We have the fire, the water at the top, and then the air, and then the earth. Okay? So that's what we see there. And we also see over here this image. The glyph of earth is meant to demonstrate that everything within our sublunary world is composed of the 4 elements. This word, sublunary, is a very important word for us to make some sense of. Sublunar world. The sublunary sphere is something that we find out of Aristotelian physics, but also Platonic physics. Let's see if we could bring this up. So see, Plato and Aristotle helped to formulate the original theory of the sublunary sphere in antiquity, the idea usually going hand in hand with geocentrism and the concept of a spherical earth. Let's see if we could find an image of the sublunary sphere. It's also in the book as well, but here we have the avatar and the last airbender. And this is the sublunary sphere, because that's really what this is to a large degree. But let's see if we could find something a little less for kids. That thing I showed you all yesterday, Ohons Fine, I think I downloaded it. I don't know if I downloaded it. But the sublunar sphere, let's see the primum. Oh, here we go. This is actually a nice image. I like to pull it up from time to time. I'm going to download this and put this on the side, because this talk is leading us to the point of why is the organization of the elements different in the zodiac than they are in our larger theory of the unfolding of the world. Primum mobile. The primum mobile, do we have a picture of it anywhere? Let's do Ohons Fine, because I really, really like his. Actually, this looks nice as well. This could probably be it. Let's use this one. This one is nice too. Oh man. Is it clearer than this? No, it's not. Okay, Control J. Let's bring up the primum mobile. Okay, here we go. So this is an image of the primum mobile. And the primum mobile essentially means the prime mover. So within ancient Greek astronomy, there is this thought that clearly we live in a geocentric universe with the Earth at the center of it all. And heaven is constructed in 7 concentric shells that all orbit around the Earth. And so, because that's how it looks. From an observed perspective, that's how it looks when you go outside. This is called geocentrism, the idea that the Earth is standing in the center of the universe and that everything is revolving around the Earth. And this is one of the things that scientists like to poo-poo astrologers for, because they're like, you're so dumb because you still practice using the geocentric model. But when a scientist tells you that, you say, no, you're so dumb, because even though you know that there is no geocentric model, then tell me, why is every astronomy textbook written geocentrically within the first few chapters of that textbook? The reason why every astronomy textbook is written geocentrically, which I know because I took astronomy in college, is because is because it is easier to teach astronomy from a geocentric perspective, because geocentrism is connected to how we perceive the world. We all know from a brain perspective, the sun doesn't rise or set. The sun stays fixed. And it's the earth that through its motion is creating this illusion of the sun rising or setting. But that still doesn't change the fact that in our language, we say, oh, meet me by the beach at sunrise, or oh, give me a call after sunsets. Our perception of the world, yeah, exactly. Thanks, Tony. Our perception of the world is essentially a perception that's based in this foundational geocentrism. And to this end, we have to ask ourselves when we talk about astrology, what is the usefulness of astrology? Astrology isn't useful for helping us live on Mars. Astrology is useful for helping us live on this earth. Therefore, our geocentric astrology that we practice, it doesn't help us navigate the wider chaos of space around us. It helps us navigate our ability to be on this planet Earth. And to be on this planet Earth, we need an Earth-based perspective of the universe. If the universe is going to guide us, we need to understand how that guidance is relevant to our lives on this Earth. We cannot understand how that guidance is relevant to our lives from the perspective of the sun. There are some people who practice heliocentric astrology. And fine, you could do your own thing. It doesn't matter to me what you do unless you're an Oraculos student. But there are some people who practice heliocentric astrology. And one of the heliocentric arguments is that it's real astrology. And so the scientists will be that much more willing to believe what we say. But it doesn't matter what we say. The scientists still won't believe it unless you could prove it to them, which is kind of what I'm trying to do at Oraculos. I'm trying to create a body of astrologers who can prove that astrology works. So the point is, the scientists won't believe anything unless you can prove it to them about astrology. So even if you practice astrology with the Earth in the center, you still sound stupid to the scientific community. Even if you practice astrology with the sun in the center, you still sound just as dumb. So the reality is practicing a heliocentric astrology to appease some part of yourself that wants to appease the scientific community isn't the way to go. Because practicing a heliocentric perspective, it is built on this misunderstanding of what we're using astrology for in the first place. I'm not using astrology to go live on no sun. If you want to go live on the sun, be my guest and you tell me how that works out. But I'm practicing astrology because I want to live on the earth in a more effective way. You see? So anyway, there are all these things. Note that today, all we're doing, what are we still defining today? We're defining what we do as astrologers. And what word are we defining from our definition? Because that's how this whole thing started yesterday. I don't know if you remember, but yesterday this whole thing started because I said that we needed to define what it meant when we said that we practice, where is it? What does it mean when we say that we practice traditional, Western, tropical astrology? And all now, guess what? I'm sorry to inform, but 2 days and we're still on this word traditional, defining what the word traditional means within the context of what we do. I apologize. If you want your money back, then write us an email and I'll give you money back. All right. So we're defining the word traditional, yes? So now back to this notion of tradition. Another thing I tell people, this book, Mastering Traditional Astrology, truthfully, as far as I'm concerned, it's a wonderful book. But this book was written specifically for the Oraculos classroom. So I'm very blessed and honored that people who haven't studied at Oraculos, thousands of people around the world have purchased this book and they're like, wow, this book makes so much sense. But studying at Oraculos makes this book make the most sense because there are some people who've read this book the first time and it didn't make sense to them or made a little bit of sense to them. Then they came to class. They took the first class. Then I sent you to the book. I see Karen nodding and Karen is saying, yes, that's how it worked out for you. You come to class and you're like, oh my God. It makes so much sense now. So this book, even though I'm writing these books for the whole world to buy, I'm writing these books specifically for the Oraculos classroom because nothing that I'm saying today will be foreign to you when you go into the book and you read the chapter associated with that. So what I tell people every week is come to class, take the class. But then when you go home in the classes, between classes, I want you to read the chapters associated with the content that we covered in class. So for example, your homework reading for this week, and I'm not going to test you on if you read it or not, because I'm 32 years old. I feel like I'm about to come up to my half-life crisis. I'm not going to test anybody on anything. But chapter 3, Hermetic Philosophy of the Pre-Cosmos, that is the chapter for you to read this week, yes? Because that's what we've been talking about all weekend. So now when you go and read this chapter, you're going to be like, oh my God, it makes so much sense. Oh my God, these things that were so boring the first time I read them, you will now want to suck them up because it now makes so much sense because we've spent 2 days going over it. So read chapter 3. Also, do me a favor, well, not me a favor, but do you a favor and read chapter 2, Branches of Traditional Astrology, which we're going to cover today as well, Branches of Traditional Astrology. So chapter 3, the Hermetic Pre-Cosmos, because it's very fascinating how the ancients thought. Then chapter 2, Branches of Traditional Astrology. It is my aspiration that you would have already read chapter 1, what is astrology? So chapter 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, and 3 for sure. And then I'll leave that there. Oh, and then chapter 4. Wow, that's so sequential. Read chapter 1 through 4. So sorry if you wrote that oddly and now you have to erase it and do it again. But read chapter 1 through 4 because that is the content. Lol indeed, Jamie. That's the content for this weekend. Chapter 1 through 4, a primer in astrological symbolism, okay? And you will find, to your great amazement, that everything that we've covered in these 2 days is basically the first 100 pages of this book. Okay? Wonderful. Let's move on. I'm happy. Most people don't like my sense of humor. Most people think I'm cantankerous and have a bad attitude. But I'm the most pleasant person you'll ever meet. Okay. Okay, where do we go from here? So yes, homework for this week, chapter 1 through 4. Thank you very much. So, fire, earth, air, water. Very, very lovely. Oh, I was going to the book because I wanted to show us the difference between the glyph of the earth element and the glyph of the other element, the part of fortune. That's going to be in chapter 4, a primer of astrological symbolism. I have all these quotes from the Corpus Hermeticum all throughout this book because I love it. If you haven't read the Corpus Hermeticum, you should read it. If you're going to make a long drive cross-country someplace, put on the Corpus Hermeticum to read. It's very, very nice. It's a nice book. So, few are the seeds of God, but they are mighty, beautiful, and good. Wow. That's a big astrological thing because the Corpus Hermeticum tells us that the seeds of God are the 7 planets. So this quote comes after that. Few are the seeds of God, but they are mighty, beautiful, and good. So moving on. Moving on. In this chapter, I wanted to specifically put this so that you could see. Note that the earth glyph is containing the equal armed cross, whereas the part of fortune glyph is containing the X. And if you ever get confused between them, you just tell yourself X marks the spot. What does it mark the spot of? X marks the spot of fortune for me to find my buried treasure, right? And the earth is not that. The earth is not that. Because this earth glyph is meant to allow you to comfortably put the fire, the water, the air, and the earth inside this, okay? Now, the cross glyph is representing fixity. You didn't know that word was a word, but it's a word. The cross glyph is representing fixity. I'm going to write that down here, perhaps. The cross glyph is representing fixity. The cross glyph represents a spiritual binding substance. And this binding substance is the glue that holds together our material world. This binding substance is the glue that's holding together our material world, which is interesting because we know, because you all came to my planets talk, we know that the cross is also representing Saturn, isn't it? The cross is representing Saturn. So wherever we see the cross, we think about the earth element, but we should also think about Saturn. And this is a part of the reason why within the Kabbalistic tarot, there is no card specific for the earth element. Because within the Kabbalistic tarot, the same card that represents Saturn is the same card that represents the earth element, the world card. And doesn't seem like we have a good one. Oh, actually, I have this whole deck as a PDF. Not as a PDF, as a whatchamacallit, as a this. I love the Bota Tarot deck. You might say, well, why don't you use it? Because I hate the minor arcana cards in the Bota Tarot deck. That's why I don't use it. The minor, anyway, wrong class. But I love the Bota Tarot deck. I hate the minor arcana cards in it, so I don't use it. But if I could, maybe I'll commission a new deck using the same Bota cards and find somebody to do the artwork for the minor arcana cards to my liking. Because as of now, the minor arcana cards in this deck are kind of not nice. So in this card, the world card, we have both Saturn. This is representing Saturn within the Kabbalistic tarot. But very often when you look at a list of attributions for the tarot cards, it will also have the earth glyph, or rather the earth element like that. So the world card is carrying double duty to represent Saturn and the earth, in the same way as the cross glyph is double duty representing Saturn and the earth, okay? So the cross glyph represents fixity, a glue that represents a spiritual binding substance. We remember that the circle represented unbridled cosmic potential, and the cross is representing a spiritual state of freezing, a spiritual state of being in stasis, to be so stuck to the point that you actually look like you have a real physical body. Therefore, what does this earth glyph represent when I put the cross inside of the circle? It represents that in order for us to maintain the illusion of our physical world as it is, we have to bind all of the spiritual powers at our disposal and place them under the governance of a fixing force, of a fixing power, of a fixing influence. And through that fixity, we end up having our material world. So the material world is actually a negation of spirit. Because remember, if there were just pure spirit, then everything would be annihilated, which isn't such a bad thing. Annihilation is an act of love, basically, which is why the water element is associated with the principle of destruction. Because what does water do? Water is the universal solvent. It melts everything back into itself. It says, I love you so much, I want you to dissolve into me. That's what water is. But that dissolving of what makes me an individual, unique being is my annihilation. So yeah, sure, love me as much as you want to love me, but don't annihilate me. Yeah, sure, I want to be loved and held and nurtured in this lifetime, but I don't want to, become one with my partner. I mean, sure, maybe you want to become one with your partner, but I don't want, you know what I mean? I don't want to start walking around in one body with you all day long. No, I love you, but I love you like that. And you love me like that. Makes you want to get married? Well, go into it. Just know that you're going to be annihilated by the process. So go for it. But yes, that's what love is. Love is this melding together of two and turning the two into one. But on an earthly level, we can do that and still celebrate that which is individualistic and unique about us. But on a metaphysical level, love is the highest form of destruction. Because on a metaphysical level, love is a complete negation of anything that makes us individual, anything that separates us, anything that dichotomizes us, anything that creates any level of inequality between us. Love on a universal level is the great equalizer. It is a dissolving of all boundaries, a dissolving of all barriers. That's what love is. Love is destruction, which is nice and not so nice. But it's really nice. It's actually very romantic. It sounds like Florence and the Machine, who I tend to love. Florence and the Machine, in her music, Florence said the most watery thing I've ever heard. Florence said that good music should feel like drowning. Isn't that crazy? Because what is music? Music is an extension of this love principle. Good music should feel like being overwhelmed. It should feel like drowning. It should feel like disappearing. That's what love is. But it's also destruction. Okay. So anyway, we have discussed the glyph of Earth. And we know that the glyph of Earth is the cross of matter placed in dominion over the circle of the spirit. So wonderful. We have all of our glyphs down pat. Now let's talk about, let's fill out this list of principles. So we remember that yesterday we had fire was hot and dry. Fire corresponded with red/yellow bile as far as humors in the body are concerned. The humors of the body, red/yellow bile. Fire corresponds with, actually what I want to do with this, better than the arrow for today, is I want to go like that. Fire corresponds with, fire is hot and dry, corresponds with the red/yellow bile, is corresponding with the temperament, which is the choleric temperament. And now we find it corresponding with the generation principle. Then we have water, which is, well, let's do it properly. We have, well, it's still not going to be proper. We have air, which is hot and wet, which is corresponding with the humor. It's not humors, it's just humor. It's red bile/yellow bile. It's humor. It's corresponding with the blood humor. It's corresponding with the temperament of the sanguine temperament, and it's corresponding with the corruption principle. Or let me put the principle, the life principle it corresponds with. It corresponds with is corruption. Thank you for putting life principle there and taking the principle off the hand. Air, fire, air, earth. Well, let's do it properly. Water is corresponding. Water is cold and wet. You can also say moist. Whether you say wet or whether you say moist is of no relevance to nobody. Okay? Thank you. Also put it next to air for the wet in the thing. And don't take out the equal, just let it be moist in the bracket. All right, so cold and wet, it's corresponding with the humor of phlegm. Phlegm is corresponding with the temperament, the phlegmatic temperament, and is corresponding with the life principle of what? Life principle of destruction. And then finally, we have, what is the final? We have the earth, which is cold and dry, is corresponding with the humor. I'll let you put the titles. I'll just put the words. It's corresponding with the humor of black bile. Corresponding with the humor of black bile, which we know is waste, human waste. Is corresponding with the melancholy temperament. Oh, I think I said yesterday, but maybe I didn't. Sometimes we see melancholer. In the same way as red bile can be called choler, sometimes we're seeing melancholer as well. Choler. Choler. In medieval science and medicine, one of the four bodily humors identified with bile and believed to be associated with a peevish or irascible temperament. also called yellow bile. And color is also thought of as anger or irascibility. Dios.
Irascible.
Irascible, having or showing a tendency to be easily angered. So if somebody was a choleric person, that person is confident, fiery, self-motivated, excited about life, but that person is also easily angered. Martian people. Okay. So yellow bile is also known as choler, and sometimes we see this word melancholer, but in general, I don't even think you could look it up. Melancholer. See? Melancholy, melancholic, melanchol, but no melancholer. Let's look it up and see what it says. See? It turns it automatically to melancholy. Even melancholia, but we don't see melancholer. I can't remember where I saw melancholer one time, but I was like, oh wow, that's amazing, melancholer. And if I remember, I'll let you know. It corresponds with preservation. This is the organization of our material world according to Aristotle and Plato. Aristotle and Plato. Well, we should say Plato and Aristotle. And Aristotle's sublunar world. Why is it called the sublunar world? Is the next question. It's called the sublunar world because we have Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Sun, Venus, Mercury, and the Moon. And under the sphere of the Moon is our material universe, basically. And so the ancients said that under the sphere of the Moon is where we interact with the fire of the heavens. The ancients also thought that the heavens were primarily composed of fire and light. And therefore, under the sphere of the Moon meaning sublunar, under the sphere of the Moon, we find ourselves experiencing the light of and the flickering flames of heaven. So fire was the first sublunar element. And between the fire that is under the sphere of the Moon and the earth, we have air. The air representing the sky that we perceive that fire through. And on top of the body of our earth is the water, aqua, the water. And then the earth itself is the final element within Plato and Aristotle's worldview. This is the order from a Platonic and an Aristotelian perspective, which is different from the order of the elements from a Kabbalistic perspective. Is it? Yes, it is. It's different from the order of the elements from a Kabbalistic perspective, which goes beyond the scope of this class, but I'll still let you know. Because one of the things that we do at the Oraculos School of Astrology is what is known as spiral education. What is spiral education? Spiral education is a concept that originated in Japan. Students at a young age are shown a very advanced topic, or are given a very advanced topic, given of an immersion in a very advanced topic. So for example, you take a child from grade 1 and you show them university level algebra and you immerse that child in it for 1 week. 1 week of university level algebra. From the age of 6 years old, they get 1 week immersion. 7 years old, 1 week immersion. And through that process, they're always confused every single step of the way. But by the time as they get to university, university level algebra is already deeply ingrained in them because of the spiral education process. So the students at a young age are given an immersion in a very advanced topic. Then it is taken away from them completely for a period of time. Say a year. Each year, they are given this same overwhelming immersion so that by the time as they are ready to actually interact with that topic, their soul and psyche will be ready to receive it. That's what spiral education is. So we're going to spiral education you into another idea. So this is Plato and Aristotle's sublunar world: fire, air, water, earth. We remember that fire is generation and earth is preservation. So what we see within Platonic and Aristotelian metaphysics is this notion that preservation is the final outcome. Is the final outcome of all universal operations. Preservation. Why would that need to be the case within Plato and Aristotle's philosophy? Because we want to feel as if our world is the final outcome. We don't want to feel as if after preservation, then comes corruption, or after preservation, then comes destruction. So we want to feel as if the final outcome of all of these things is preservation. You understand? We want to feel as if our world is a stable place because it looks and feels stable to us. We don't want to feel as if after us forming some illusion of stability within our mind, then that's when it's all going to go to hell. It's destruction and corruption. So this is the organization of the elements from a Platonic and an Aristotelian perspective. We also have something similar in the Kabbalah. So in Kabbalah and in the Kabbalistic cosmology, we also have fire. We also have fire, water, but it's different. Fire, water, air, and earth. And this is because from a Kabbalistic perspective, the fire element is corresponding with the archetypal world, which is the world of raw force, of raw seminal. And yes, by seminal, I do mean sperm, because in the Kabbalistic everything, in the Kabbalistic cosmology, there's a lot of, penis and vagina talk. So the world of the raw seminal power of God, G, D, the world of the raw seminal power of God, followed by, that's the archetypal world, then the creative world. This is the creative world, which is the world where the seed of God finds expression within the creative womb, within the womb of creation, which is what we would expect the water element to represent. Then we go to the formative world, which is the world where the fetus of the embryo of creative power is now given an outline and an intelligent nucleus that guides what it will do in the material world. So, for example, if I'm creating a chair within the mind of God, and that chair in the mind of God is some flaming idea in God's mind, but it's just manifesting as this concept of rest. And then it goes into the realm of water. And then all of the water angels start saying, oh my God, rest is a wonderful concept. Oh, it's, all sorts of ways that the body can rest. Rest. Resting laying down, resting standing up, resting in the chair, rest. All the angels in the water realm go crazy. And then in the formative realm, we say, okay, no, we want to rest our buttocks. We want to rest in the chair. We need to create a structure that can actually support somebody sitting down. And so the formative world is the world of the blueprint. That's where we discover what we're here to do in the first place. And then in the material world, the world where the material manifestation actually expresses itself. So that's the four world theory from a Kabbalistic perspective. Still, it does not match our signs of the zodiac, because the signs of the zodiac isn't fire, water, air, earth, and neither is it fire, air, water, earth. The signs of the zodiac the organization of the elements in the signs of the zodiac is meant to is meant to inform us that reincarnation is central to Western mysticism and Western astrological thought. What in the world? What do the signs of the zodiac have to do with reincarnation? Well, let's look at it. We have fire. We have earth. We have air. And we have water. Fire corresponds with generation. Earth corresponds with preservation. Air corresponds with corruption. Water corresponds with destruction. When we are born, the fire element corresponds with our first entry into the material world as babes. When we're born, our whole life is in a stage of generation. Babies heal quicker. Babies have more possibilities ahead of them as far as their growth process is concerned. Everything with babies is full of life and full of universal life force energy. Babies heal quicker. They represent well springs of youth and vitality, which is why I can't remember the movie where all of the old witches, Hocus Pocus, which is why in Hocus Pocus, they wanted to eat all the children. Hopefully you don't have children around or listening to me, but they wanted to eat all the children because they wanted to steal the youth, and what they really were stealing was the fire within the children, right? They were stealing that part of the children that keeps them in a state of generation. They wanted to steal all the life force energy from the children. And so fire is representing our life as babes. And then the earth element, this is representing the period of life called young adulthood. In young adulthood, it's crazy that between the age of, say, 16 and 29 years old, you feel like you're going to live forever. Between 16 and 29, you feel like you're going to be on this earth for as long as the earth will exist, and there's nothing wrong with you, and you feel as if every single day has been promised to you in the future. And lo and behold, you have your first Saturn return, and you realize that all of that was a flaming pot of you know what. Because it's a lie, it's not true. So the earth represents the period of life called young adulthood, where we all feel the most vital. And as if we are in the prime of life. That's what the earth element is representing. It's representing a period of life where we feel stable. Earth is representing the period of life in which we feel most stable. And maybe you didn't have a stable period of life between 16 and 29, But in terms of your physical constitution is never going to be as stable as it is between 16 and 29, because after 29 and you hit your Saturn return, it's a downward spiral from 30 onward. So if you're not 30 yet, hold on to it as long as you can, because afterwards, it's no turning back. So then after that, corruption. This corresponds with the period of life after 30, but I'm not going to put that in writing because none of you are going to criminalize me and say that Mychal Bryan wrote this in the working document. No. So we're just going to pretend as if it's only verbal. So the corruption is corresponding with the period of life where you realize, ruh-roh, in the words of Scooby-Doo. Have you ever watched Scooby-Doo? Ruh-roh, something's going wrong. These bones are starting to hurt. What is this knee pain I'm having? I can't go out to the club every Friday night with the girls and throw it back like I used to. It's a problem. As we pass 30 and we get older, we realize that our body is starting. I had a cousin once. Oh, apparently. I'm saying once like she's dead. She's very alive. I had a cousin who said that she can't look at corners, like she can't go in the room. Yeah, exactly, like the oxidation of iron. She said she can't look at corners. Now, I believe this is because she used to misbehave as a child and she used to get put in the corner a lot. But she said she can't look at corners. And then you say to her, Maisha, why can't you look at corners? And she say, because when I look at corners, I feel like my body is shutting down. And that is what this is. That is what it is. After you pass the age of whatchamacallit, you feel like your body is shutting down. Well, let me not put the age on it. But the point is, after you pass a particular period of life, it corresponds with a period of life where you feel like your situation is turning off. Your body is no longer able to hold you in the same with the same vitality as it did before, because you actively feel yourself aging. And I think that is actually the biggest piece. Between 0 and 29, you don't feel yourself aging. Between 0 and 29, you don't feel the aging process. And I'm using 29 as kind of like who knows? But between 0 and 29, you're not supposed to feel yourself aging. After 29, you're at 30. I don't know about you all, but when I hit 30, like I started to feel some stuff in my body. And I was like, oh my God, what is this feeling? Is this what my grandparents feel like? I started to feel some stuff because after 29, our perception of time, it was a devastation. After 29, our perception of time becomes so much more critical. And I think that's what that Saturn return is about. When we say that the Saturn return and oh my God, the Saturn return, who is Saturn within our Western thought? Saturn is the Grim Reaper, isn't he? What is the Grim Reaper? The Grim Reaper is the Lord of Death. So when you go through your Saturn return, we all cross this threshold of angst because one is the angst of, oh my God, I'm getting old, And it's crazy because after you pass 30 and you listen to people who are 29 talk about, oh my God, I'm getting old. It's like, please give me a break. Like get over yourself. Like, what's your problem? Anyway, but you feel, oh my God, I'm getting old. Oh my God, I'm like decrepit. I'm crippling. I'm turning into dust, basically, because that is the pressure of Saturn, which is why when we go through the Saturn return, we also have this internal question. What am I doing with my life? Have any of you faced that when you hit 30, that threshold between 29 and 30? Was that an experience of life? Erica is saying, yes, that was your experience of life. You have this thing, what am I doing with my life? Like, what is going on? What's happening? What have I done with my life? You start to ask yourself all of these very existential questions when you pass your first Saturn return. And then when you pass your second Saturn return, it becomes a little bit more like you come to terms with it a little bit more. And you're like, okay, I've done this. I've done my life. And when you pass your second Saturn return, it's better than your first Saturn return because Saturn is also the god of old age. So your first Saturn return, the god of old age, passes through your life and you feel like, holy like what is going on? Like, oh my God, what is this sudden old age that's descended upon me? But when you go through it a second time, it's like, okay, Saturn, I know you. We've been there before. This isn't so stressful, which is why a lot of people go back to school at the age of 60. A lot of people go back to school at the age of 60. A lot of people take up a new course of study at the age of 60. People go skydiving at 60. Whereas when you turn 30, you just want to die. Because at the age of 60, you have this new lease on life. Like, okay, I've done this before. Whoa, here we are, where we're diving into something new. And I know that past 60, I'm closer to the end of my mortal coil than I was at the age of 30. But now I feel like I really know who I am as a person. I feel like I've done this life thing. I've lived through 2 Saturn returns. I'm ready to see what the future has for me. It's a great thing. It's a great time. I haven't been there yet, but I've heard it's great. Okay, so that is the 60. So look forward to 60. Dread 30, but look forward to 60. And by the time as you've had your 3rd Saturn return, you should just be eating ice cream every day. You should just be, I don't even know what to say. You should be eating as much steak as you want every single day. Eat whatever, do whatever, go to the club, live your best life because, So fire, earth, air, and water. So corruption is where we feel ourselves starting to age, which is something that is invisible to our consciousness before we pass that 30, 35-year-old threshold. Then destruction. Don't really need to describe that, but destruction, this corresponds with the period where we are really slipping down the slope, where we are really starting to experience that there is, let me say it differently, let me put it in the language that we've used today, where there is more chaos than cosmos within us. There is more forces that are pulling us back into the morphic field from which we arose than there are forces that are sustaining the individuality of our specific lives. So in our birth process, there's more cosmos than chaos. As babies, there is more cosmos than chaos. As very, very old adults, there is more chaos than cosmos because there is more that is actively at play within your soul and psyche that is pulling you back into the uterus of Sheila Nagig than when you were a baby. Isn't that fascinating? It's fascinating. And you think that, do you think that people came up with this stuff? I didn't come up with anything. One of the things within my life that I've never wanted to be blamed for or that I never wanted to be said about me is that Mychal Bryan is just out here in these astrological streets making shit up. I don't make stuff up because I come from the Caribbean. I have a very tall shame tree. And when you have a very tall shame tree, you never want to suffer the embarrassment of saying something or teaching something to people that doesn't actually stand on the root of something bigger than yourself. I don't make anything up, which is why there are so many quotes in Mastering Traditional Astrology. The way that I may have, elucidated or the way I may have explained those things are specific to me, but nothing that I'm saying is anything that I've made up myself because I don't believe in that personally. Okay. Now, my darling loves, it's 2:09. I think that we should all take a little tiny breakish because you've been here sitting down so long. And so let's all take a tiny break and then I'll go drink some water because I'm trying to do more of that. And when we come back, I'll see what else I have to say to you. Okay, take a break. TTYL in the universe. Let's end on a high note. So, let's dive in. And I'm going to save some time at the end for us to talk and, do stuff. Let's continue to layer our cosmos. So, we said that in the zodiac, this is the organization of our elements because because we want to, our zodiac must declare this message that the human soul goes on. That's the point of it. So we don't have the fire signs automatically followed by the water signs, because they exist on two different ends of the spectrum, generation and destruction. They're polar opposites. So one, we need to put them as far away from each other as possible. And as a result of that, that is why they are as far away from each other as possible. And, I mean, that's kind of what it is. And because they're polar opposites and they are antagonistic towards each other, or they fight with each other. And secondly, we want to express that there is some level of periodicity within everything. Within Western esoterics, there is an axiom that states that periodicity, periodicity, oh, there's my voice. Thank Jesus, it came back for like 2 seconds. That periodicity exists within everything. This is a central tenet of Western mysticism. Periodicity exists within everything. We see this within the phases of the moon, and we also see this within the seasons, don't we? So, in the 4 phases of the moon and the 4 seasons. Why did I capitalize the 4? Because so far, we see ourselves living in a quadripartite universe in every way, shape, or form. Our elements are quadripartite. Our life processes are quadripartite. The parts of the name of God are quadripartite. The worlds within which God descended his spiritual seed to create the physical universe is 4-parted as well. Every single thing that exists within the heart of Western mysticism is 4-parted. You might say, but isn't there a 5th element? There is a 5th element. And you know what the only thing in our entire cosmos is that's created from that 5th element? The planets. Which is why the ancients say that the super celestial beings operate through elemental, corruptible beings. We are made up of these 4 elements, which is why when Mars goes that way, you bang your head on the wall. When Saturn goes that way, you scrape your knee. When Jupiter goes that way, you put on 10 more pounds. When Venus goes that way, you get a pimple on your skin. When the moon goes that way, you get bloated after you eat. When the sun goes that way, you suffer from exhaustion. Why do we have all of these physical influences? Because we are made up of the elements. So the planets are the primary causers, which is why Guido Bonatti says that a cause is always going to be pure. So if the planets are representing primary sources of causation, then where are their effects felt? Their effects are felt in the lives of all of us who are made up of the elements that those planets churn through their motion. So we see this in the 4 phases of the moon and the 4 seasons. Why did I capitalize that? Because guess what? The phases of the moon are, well, let's talk about the seasons. We have the springtime. The springtime where we have, the spring follows the winter, doesn't it? So in springtime, we have hot and wet. Then we have the summertime. In the summer, we have hot and dry. Then we have the autumn, which if you're from the US, I think in the US you call it the fall or something, but in the Caribbean we say autumn. Anyway, in the autumn, we have the autumn. And what is this? What is autumn? Autumn is going to be cold and dry. And then in the winter, what do we have? We have cold and wet, which clearly is going to correspond with hot and wet is air. It is the blood. Hot and wet is air. It is the blood. It is the sanguine temperament. Hot and dry, hot and dry is the fire. It is the, what's the next thing? It's the fire. It is the red/yellow bile. It is the choleric temperament. Autumn is cold and dry. It is the earth. It is the stool, aka the black bile. It is the melancholy. Melancholy is what most people say. So don't mind me with melancholer. Melancholer, like I say, I only found one source in 400 years that said melancholy. And who knows, maybe that person was drunk when they were writing, because people have been getting drunk for a long time. So melancholy is the correct thing to say. Do not say melancholer. Say melancholy so people don't look at you like you're crazy. Or you could say melancholic. Melancholic. Like that. And then winter is what? Winter is water. It is phlegm. Phlegm. It is the phlegmatic temperament. What do I say every single week? Every single week I say to you, I do not need you to know anything other than what I taught the week before. Yes? How much was taught this week before? Let's go check. How much? Let's see how many pages we have. When you heard me say that, you probably thought, oh, that's small fry stuff. We are on 8 pages of content that was taught in the course of the last 2 days, which means next weekend, my only expectation is for you to know this 8 pages of content and to do the reading from the book. But guess what? I am the book. So if you don't read the book, but you only read the working document and watch the video again, that's completely fine by me. You don't need to read the book, truthfully, because the book only came around what year? Last year. And before that, I was the book. So this is the book. Use the working document. Now, here's something you will only find at Oraculos, which is really, really cool, because I've been thinking about this for a number of years. But I was like, hold on. Periodicity exists within everything. Therefore, this isn't just regular hot. In springtime, the heat is brand new. So in springtime, that must be young hot. And if the heat of the springtime is young, then the wet in the springtime has to be old wet. Then I went through it and I said, old wet, what happens to old wet? It drops down dead and it changes to young dry. Sounds like somebody's rapper name, Young Dry. It changes to young dry. And if the heat was young in the springtime, then what does it become in the summertime? Old hot. So here we have springtime is composed of young hot and old wet. Summertime composed of old hot and young dry. The old hot drops down dead and turns into young cold. Young cold in the autumn. The dry is old dry. Sounds like a deodorant or a rum. Old dry. And then in the winter time, the young cold becomes an old ferocious cold, old cold and young wet. The young wet sounds like something not suitable for teens, but old cold and then young wet. And so now we have all of the combinations and we see that periodicity exists within everything. Young hot plus old wet is springtime. Old hot plus young dry is summer. Young cold plus old dry is autumn. Old cold plus young wet is the winter time. And we have our 4 seasons. This is also going to correspond with the 4 phases of the moon. The first quarter of the moon is corresponding with hot and wet and the air element. The second quarter of the moon is corresponding with the fire element. The third quarter of the moon is corresponding, let me take out this melancholic so that it could be nice, is corresponding with the earth element. And the fourth quarter of the moon is corresponding with the water element. Okay? So here we see this in the 4 phases of the moon and the 4 seasons. And I just demonstrated for you how we see this in the 4 phases of the moon and the 4 seasons. Okay? People, I think that's good enough for today. Yes? Thank you all so much for coming out this weekend, this first weekend of class. Yesterday we had a little bit of a situation that was, crazy. But today we caught our bearings and today was good. It was a very good day in my opinion. Yesterday was also a good day. As you can see, what we do is we grow things on top of each other. We grow. Yesterday's class was the basis for today's class, and it grows sequentially. And that sequencing is very important because as astrologers, more than people who tell the future or who do magic stuff, we are organizers of information. No matter what you're doing in life, if you're working with people, you are an organizer of information. And so I try to express that in terms of how I teach at Oraculos. Yesterday's class was the foundation upon which this class was built, which made this class a little bit more easier to go through. Next week's class is going to be the same way until we would have essentially organized the information into the entirety of this book, Mastering Traditional Astrology. So I sincerely hope that you had a good time with us this weekend. Did you have a good time? Little bit of a good time, all right time? Very good. I sincerely hope that you had a wonderful time this weekend joining us in class. And I sincerely hope that this is filling places within your knowledge that probably weren't there before. Because I like to feel that at Oraculos, we have a completely different approach to teaching things. And it's not different because I'm different. It's just different because I've chosen to prioritize not just the astrology, but the larger metaphysical world in which the astrology exists. Because if you're just teaching the astrology, but you're not teaching this background information, which the majority of people teaching astrology aren't teaching this background information, then you end up having the fruit, but you have no idea about the tree that it came from. So at Oraculos, you learn about the tree, the root system of the tree, the bark, the branches, the leaves, all of the things, so that you can feel grounded and rooted within yourself. When you feel grounded and rooted within yourself, you don't feel like you have to rely on your intuition on the spot to teach you or to tell you something, because you know that everything you're doing, it's built within a larger framework and a system. And when you have a system to rely on, then you're 1,000% more supported than people who feel as if they have to pull it from their intuition every time they practice. Intuition is fine, but intuition without a framework is completely useless. And at Oraculos, we give you the framework so that your magic can be that much more profound and that much more alive within the heart of the people who you're going to be serving. So thank you so much for joining us this weekend. We're going to make sure that everybody who signed up for this course, for the free drop-in and see if you like it, part of it is that you're going to get all the things. You're going to get the working document for this weekend. And if you thought that you were going to just use a working document privately for the next 14 weeks, I'm smart. So you're going to get the link for this working document. And then the rest of you who have registered for the course, we're going to copy and paste this information into a brand new private working document so that we can continue building our working document there. At the end of the semester, the working document is usually 200 pages long, somewhere thereabout. So you're going to end up with a whole new Mastering Traditional Astrology written just for you in your working document, okay? So there's that. Also, we will give the links for this lecture today and the lecture yesterday to all of the people who have signed up for the course via the free weekend or for the full program, and that's all you're going to get. So the people who are signing up for the full program, you will get a link to a student portal in which you will find all of the recordings, all of the 28 recordings for the next 14 weeks, as well as the 3 planetary videos that I said that I would send to you free of charge. I'll send that to you as well. So there's a lot of reasons to stick around. And I sincerely hope that some of you who came just for this weekend, that you decide that you want to stick around. At Oraculos, I've never turned anybody away because of any reason whatsoever at all. I never turn anybody away. I welcome everybody into FOCA. And so if there's anything that you need, whether it's a payment plan that you need or any plan that you need, then please let us know so that we could do what you need. If this is where you want to be, and if this is how you want to grow, and if this is the sort of astrological container that you want to grow in, then please shoot me an email, let me know, say, hey, Mychal, I can't do it the full way, but this is what I can do starting off. And this is a plan that we can have going through the rest of the semester so that you could continue to be here within this vortex. We just spent 2 days together. When I was a child, I said to my mother that if things in the universe didn't happen exactly the way that they should happen, the whole universe would blow up. And I was 12 years old, but I've grown up to become the astrologer I am today. And at 32 years old, I even more so believe that that's true. That if things don't happen the exact same way that they're supposed to happen, the entire universe will explode. We are here this weekend together because we were meant to be here this weekend together. We're here this weekend together because there is something that was taught within the course of the last 2 days that you were meant to hear. And who knows why you were meant to hear it? I don't know, but maybe it makes sense to you that like, oh wow, that's the piece that I wanted to hear, or that's the piece I need to hear. Some of you may have come here to realize this is definitely not the place I want to spend my astrological education in, or my astrological re-education in. Because a lot of people come to Oraculos who've already been trained by everybody else, and then they find themselves here. So maybe you say, this isn't the place I want to spend my astrological education. And now on Sunday, after going through 2 days of this hell, I realize that this isn't the place for me. But hopefully there are more of you who feel like, hey, after going through this 2 days together, there's something here that we haven't seen anywhere else. And this is what I want in my life. And this is where I want to build the temple of my astrological practice. And if that feels true to you, then I would love to have you. So please, you can still register for the course on the website. You can also shoot me an email and say, hey, Mychal, this is what we need to do. And that my email address is hello@oraculosastrology.com. All of you would have gotten an email from us yesterday, hello@oraculosastrology.com, and let me know what you need. Because if you want to be here, then I want you to be here. And I will do everything within me to make sure that you can be here comfortably, regardless of what your circumstances are, and we'll have a good time. So have a wonderful day in the universe. I love you all so much. I feel like I'm surrounded by family, and I really, really cherish all of you. TTYL, read the book, watch the video, go over the working document. I'll see you all next week. TTYL in the universe. You're so welcome, everybody. PCA2 people, let's leave and come back.